Kyle,
Emily?
What do you want to happen to your body when you die?
No.
Listeners might remember, if they listened to our previous episode, that this is what Kyle asked me. I already had this question written down when that happened.
Wow. I feel like I used to have answers to it. And like when I wrote this question down for you last week, I was like, I don't even know anymore what I want.
Wow, you've lost your sense of wonder for what you want to happen to your remains?
Because like I think there was a point in my life where I was like, oh, like, what's the point in being buried? It's just wasting space. You know, throw me into the ocean, make me into a tree. But now I read Aragon, and in Aragon, when the wizard dies, they build this beautiful white marble casket for him to be eternally laid in, to rest in. And I'm like, yeah, I want people to see my body at the Capitol Rotunda forever.
Like preserved, like visibly?
Yeah, I want them to like vacuum seal me, you know, like carbonite me.
Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. Every week on Butter No Parsnips, your hosts Emily Moyers and Kyle Imperatore take you on an adventure through the weird, wacky, wonderful, and sometimes even wicked world of one wayside word. Strange characters, delightful bits, and general joyousness abound. Join them as they test each other's etymological expertise.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Butter No Parsnips. I'm Kyle Imperatore.
And I'm Emily Moyers. Kyle, I got an excellent word for today.
Is it a doozy?
It will be. It might not be when you first hear it, but
okay, that's fine. A slow burn.
It's a slow burn.
I'm excited. Is the word grape?
No. Do you want to keep guessing until you get it, or do you want me to just tell you what it is?
That's the episode, right? That's what the doozy's going to be.
Yeah, you got to find it. Kyle, your word today is charnel. Charnel. Charnel.
Charnel. Ah. It's a thing, Emily. I can tell you it's a thing.
It is a thing. And it is, yeah. It's a thing.
For some reason, Charnel House is popping out to me.
Yes, Kyle. Oh, no.
But I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I don't know what it is. And it feels Dickensian. I feel like this is something that's like in A Christmas Carol. A charnel house.
Might be mentioned.
He didn't live in a charnel house. Can I ask for the language of origin?
You can. It is originally Latin. We got it through French.
Interesting. It feels French with the CH.
Yeah.
And it's a noun, I'm guessing.
It is a noun. Can be a verb. Can be an adjective. But definitely most often a noun.
To charnel.
To charnel. Charneling.
Let me take a guess first, and then you can give me a hint. All right. Charnel is... Oh, a charnel is a place where they incinerate bodies.
No. That would be a crematorium.
Well, I mean, this is the French version of it. The French version. A charnelorium. Yes, give me a hint, please.
Okay, your hint is rattling.
Rattling?
Rattling.
Rattling?
Yep.
Not rattling? Rattling?
No, rattling for sure. Apostrophe included.
Rattling? Oh, this doesn't help at all.
No.
Rattling.
It connected in my head.
See, now I'm thinking of like the Marley's chains in
possibly.
They're
possibly
rattling.
Something else that might rattle.
Bones rattle. Oh, but what the heck does charnel mean if we're talking about rattling bones?
I don't know.
Is a charnel like a garland made with bones?
Oh, it is not, but in the right direction.
Wow. Okay.
Do you want me to tell you, Kyle?
Yeah, I can't get it.
Kyle, a charnel is a vault or building where human skeletal remains are stored.
Oh, like a mausoleum.
Well, no. So you know how in like horror movies or fantasy movies, the characters will just come across a dungeon full of like piles of loose bones? That's real, and that's this. That's called a charnel.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Dear Lord.
Yeah. We're getting macabre today.
Oh my. Why?
Yeah.
Knowing that this is our past as humanity, why do we insist on moving forward? We don't deserve to move forward. All right,
so
that's
give
the
it
noun.
time, Kyle.
Wait,
let it cook.
What does to charnel mean?
To charnel is to store human skeletal remains in such a place, to do the practice of charneling. And as an adjective, it can mean pertaining to or fit for a charnel, or just sepulchral, death-like, ghastly.
Oh, charnel. Oh, I like that. That's fun.
Charnel as an adjective is the most fun and probably the most usable.
Because it's the most removed from
from a
room.
Dungeon full of bones.
Oh, God.
I do want to quickly establish off the bat that the word charnel has a few different use cases and also has a few other definitions besides what I just said. They all mostly hover around this same topic, but for the purpose of this ideally 30-minute podcast episode, we're going to focus on the most common context.
Totally fair.
So in that context...
And then for buttered parsnips, we'll visit a charnel and we'll talk about the other words from inside.
Yikes.
Hold us to it.
They're all so far away.
That's your concern?
That's my only concern, is distance. Kyle, charnel has been used in English from at least the 14th century, I think probably earlier than that. It was directly borrowed from the Old French charnel, spelled the same, means the same. That word was derived from the late Latin carnale.
I just want to say Charnel is probably the worst perfume, right?
Yes.
Charnel number 5.
Charnel number 5 does smell like dry corpse, you know?
Yeah, not wet corpse, dry corpse, dusty
like flaking
corpse.
Skin.
Yeah.
Carnale, the Latin word, referred to a graveyard. Based on the time that late Latin was spoken, this term goes at least as far back as the 6th century, and it is derived from the Latin adjective carnalis, meaning relating to flesh or bodies.
It's the reason why we can order carne asada today.
That's right. It's from the Latin root carnis, meaning flesh or meat. It is where we get the English word carnal, as well as the festival carnevale or carnival.
Is meat time? Is that what it means? Meat season?
The exact etymology is debated. The two translations that I've seen is a farewell to meat or a removal of meat, because Carnival is the last day before Lent begins, when Christians abstain from eating meat.
Sure.
So it's like we're gonna have one last big blowout and just really ham it up, and then we're gonna say goodbye to meat and to carnal pleasures of the flesh.
Oh, sure.
And
wow.
Do Lent.
And I'm learning so much about Lent today, Emily.
That's really what I want to talk about today.
Yeah.
No, what I want to talk about is spooky, scary skeletons. Kyle, I said at the top, a charnel is basically a room full of bones. And you had I think you had your question was, why should we continue living now that we know that existed? It might also prompt questions like, why do we have a word for that? Is that a thing?
Why did we do enough of them that we needed to come up with something to refer to it?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Kyle, let me walk you through a scenario.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Imagine an English church. An old one on some street corner in London. It's been there for 1,000 years. It's got a humble little churchyard beside it. My question for you, Kyle, how old are the graves in that 1,000-year-old churchyard?
Oh, I mean, at least 1,000 years, I guess.
What about everyone who's died since then, Kyle?
Oh.
What do we do with them?
Oh, God.
They have to be buried on sacred ground. They have to be buried in the churchyard, Kyle.
I mean, can't there be some sort of parking garage, but for bodies?
Meaning what?
Can you drive underground and layer them up? like a bone lasagna?
Or what we could do is...
So you're telling me, all right, I don't want to ruin you,
No, I want you to
get...
No, I want you to get to this unfortunate conclusion by yourself.
I mean, it makes sense, but I hate it. So you're saying that, okay, Graveyard's full. Old bones in the bone room, new bones in the graveyard.
You got it, Kyle.
Oh, no.
Charnels are the unfortunate but necessary answer to the question, how do we make sure everyone gets a religiously correct treatment after death with limited real estate?
I don't think that's fair to the older bones either.
No, absolutely not. They have to get dug up.
And then they're just thrown in loose into a room?
Well, we'll talk about it. This concept is not limited to, but primarily associated with Catholicism, and became common practice around the medieval era. For centuries, Catholicism and other religions believed it was very important to inter the dead on sacred ground, that they would be safe there. And they would create a bubble of sanctity for the living as well. But due to rapidly rising populations, having ample space in the churchyards was becoming more and more of a problem. So they arrived at a practice where the dead would be buried for a few years, long enough for the body to decompose, and then later, those skeletons would be removed and reinterred elsewhere.
As somebody who's getting into the field of archiving, it makes so much sense from like a logistic point of view.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this is just going to be the plan moving forward. And that's how we'll, execute this.
Reserve, shelf space for future collections.
Yeah, exactly. These are what people are going to want to check out. Yeah. So the other stuff can go in storage.
Yes.
But as a human, I want to stop being a human. It gets worse.
From what I was reading, it wasn't like, oh, it's been 3 years, we will now dig up Mr. Smith. The articles described it more like, we were digging a new grave and oops, we bumped into a couple of skeletons. Chuck them in the room.
But like, there are like boxes under there too.
You hit a box while digging and you're like, well, we need the space, so we got to take apart this box and
that's crazy. It's so
get the bones out of there.
Oh, God. Every fiber of my being hates this.
In Catholic parishes, the bones were reinterred in communal burial pits or in crypts under churches, called charnels or charnel pits or charnel houses, as you correctly remembered. They were also sometimes referred to as ossuaries. Ossuary. That is derived from the Latin root os, os. Can you guess what that root means, Kyle?
Bone.
You got it.
Okay, cool.
We see that root in a medical prefix.
Osteoporosis.
Yeah, you got it. The prefix osteo in medicine means relating to bones.
Sure. I've heard ossuary before in video games, I think.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. It is used equally, if not more often than charnel, and it is broader than charnel. It can refer to like any container for skeletal remains. That might be like a box or a niche in a wall, whereas a charnel is usually like a room, a space, a building. What do you think, Kyle? Would you want a private residence or roommates?
For my bones?
Yeah.
I think I'd probably want roommates at that point. You know, if I can't move, I'd want someone to talk to, Yeah.
So you can be there all playing cards as you're rattling.
Yeah. If I can move, then I want more bones so that it's more fun when we play the xylophone on our rib cages. There's more note options.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, Kyle, it would be tricky to tell whose rib cage is whose. Yeah. Generally speaking, the function of a charnel, as we've said, is to maximize storage space. So the bones were not typically laid out person by person. I mean, in our previous episode, you mentioned that there was this belief in the supposed resurrection of the dead at the end of time. This was a very firm belief in the medieval era, but as charnel scholar Thomas J. Farrow put it, the power of the Almighty, it seems, was not so easily thwarted by a good jigsaw puzzle.
I mean, really good, because it's like, if you take that one step of logic and be like, we can put us back together, then it's
truly.
Like,
They're like, the bones don't all need to be together, they just need to be there for the soul to come back to. The soul will figure it out.
Yeah.
So in some cases, the bones were just sort of amassed together, like sometimes kind of sorted by shape, like pile up the skulls over there and then stack all the longer bones over here and so on and so on.
I'm hating the image of some poor wretch being like, All right. Just with his bare hands touching bones.
Give me the bones.
Human bones. Be like, all right. Well, I think this is a tibula. Oh, well, I'm going to put this over here. And it's just, I don't like it.
Well, you might like that better than what I'm about to tell you.
Oh, no.
Some charnel houses embedded the skulls and other bones in the walls and columns and ceilings and things. Great example of this is the Chapel of Bones in Évora, Portugal. Particularly noteworthy, it has just entire walls, entire shrines that are like just uninterrupted bones, like solid wall of skulls and bones. And there are other examples as well of that.
I am stunned that one person came up with this idea and that other people agreed to. I see. If somebody said, hey, what about this? I'd say, you can leave this town and never come back.
Kyle, this is a historical religious practice honoring our dead.
I don't care.
Well, how about maybe you'll like this better, Kyle? Some charnel houses get a little more ornate with their bone walls. For instance, the Golden Chamber of St. Ursula's Basilica in Cologne, Germany, that also has like walls of bones, but they're kind of arranged in lines of like smaller designs as well as writing made out of bones.
Have you ever watched Crashbox? Have we ever talked about Crashbox, the TV show?
No.
It was just like a kid show, and there would be like a bunch of different little like games that you would play with the TV. And one of the games was a dead pirate named Captain Bones. And the whole point was he would make a math equation out of his bones, and you had to move one bone to change the equation.
Yeah.
And
you could do that on this wall.
It's like fridge magnets, but with skeletal remains.
Yeah, absolutely. But
God, I hate it.
The award for best decor has to go to the Sedlec ossuary in Kutná Hora, Czech Republic, known for its bone coat of arms and its bone chandelier, as well as also walls of bones. Yeah, the chandelier is chilling. Beautifully macabre.
I guess beautifully macabre, but For
the curious and not for the faint of heart, images of these and more charnels can now be found on @ButterNoParsnips podcast on Facebook and Instagram. But truly, be warned.
But hopefully behind a
Nope, out in the open. Hey, it's spooky time. As I said, charnels are primarily a thing of the medieval era. I believe some Roman Catholic charnels are still like in use for new burials. It was tricky to tell which are like just open as historic sites and which are like being used. It seems like they're still used in places where there's like rocky or dry soil that makes burial difficult. So this is like an easier option than digging a bunch more graves.
Wait, you're saying still used?
For new burials, I think. It was tricky to tell.
You're telling me that that still today there are people saying, let's put these bones room.
Listen, there are lots of religious practices that seem very antiquated because they're like traditional.
Listen, I'm not coming at any religious practices here.
You can't.
I can. I sure can. But I'm not. But this is horrifying to hear. There's got to be some sort of, I don't know, talk, some sort of TED talk to try and get us on board. Because, oh boy.
Kyle, maybe you'll be relieved to know that most of England's charnel houses were shut down during the Protestant Reformation. In the 16th century, the Protestant Church of England rose to prominence, and the English crown basically said, if it's Catholic, it's gotta go. So, yeah, this like went along with the dissolution of the monasteries, where a lot of Catholic monasteries were shut down. Charnel houses were largely shut down as well, because charnels were serving a very practical need, which is limited space in churchyards. Yeah. The practice did continue under different names, I think.
Oh, interesting.
But definitely the term charnel houses was not used to refer to anything actively in use, and the existing charnel houses were all either emptied or just bricked up and left.
I'm sorry. Okay, wait. Both of those are horrifying. What emptied? Where?
Well, presumably the remains were then buried in graveyards.
Okay. bricked up? You mean that there's just
so
there's stale air rooms that we haven't opened yet?
So they were like bricked up crypts under London, and the knowledge of them was so thoroughly erased that in the 1800s, several disused charnels were like accidentally unearthed, and nobody knew what they were.
Oh my gosh.
Could you imagine not knowing any of this and then finding a hidden dungeon with walls made of bones beneath London?
You'd be like, wow, we have an evil wizard living in London.
Like, truly.
It's Skeletor.
He's there.
He's there.
But there are other reasons that charneling fell out of favor across Europe. Public health concerns about having crowds of living and crowds of dead so close together, including the miasma theory, see episode 112. Rising secularism, which meant that burial practices and burial grounds became more under the purview of state and local government than under the purview of churches. A cultural shift towards individual graves and family crypts, particularly among the upper and middle classes who could afford them. And eventually, increasing popularity of cremation as an acceptable and more space-efficient practice. That said, cremation was not officially accepted by the Vatican until 1963. That's information I learned this week.
I mean, that makes sense to me. That feels like a really recent thing. Honestly, I'm surprised it's that early. I thought you were going to say like 1999.
And like, I think the decline of charnels across Europe happened like over several centuries, and many of them are still there, whether or not they're in use. You can go find them. They're crazy looking.
I mean, fascinating. As horrifying as this episode has been, I might be interested in visiting one. Might.
They're spooky for sure. Now, Kyle, before you and I are dead and buried, we should close out this charnel discussion. And you should use this word in a sentence.
Man, Emily, I wish I could say like you did last week that I've been thinking about it the whole episode. But
I've started doing it. It's a game changer. Remember, it can be an adjective that just means death-like.
No, I want to use it the way that we talked about it in the episode.
Okay.
So, charnel, what I'm going to say is, sometimes when I'm eating chicken wings...
I hate where this is going.
I feel bad about having to throw out the bones of something that was once living that I had just eaten. And so I wish that we had chicken charnels to solve that problem.
I guess you could make one.
I could, but then I'd have to brick it up for a chicken to find in 100 years.
Yes. Yep. Whoever purchases your house next is gonna knock through the basement and find walls of chicken bones.
Emily, wow, what a spooky episode you have brought to us to close out this month of spooks. I am thoroughly saturated with fear. So thank you for that.
Well, Kyle, I hope you got room for just a little bit more, because it's time for a game.
I can make room.
Kyle, your game is called And That's What You Missed on Charnels. And that's literally what it is. Kyle, I've got some multiple choice questions here aimed at covering at least a few of the ossuaries and charnels that exist in other contexts besides what we talked about today.
Awesome.
And you're just going to answer them.
Okay.
First one. In Zoroastrianism, skeletal remains are eventually placed in ossuaries, but only after the deceased spend up to a year atop a tower of silence, under a stone of protection, or inside a house of decay.
Wow. I'm sorry. Tower of Silence really shook me. I can't possibly imagine that is the answer, because that's implying that there are corpses that aren't silent, and I don't want to envision that world. So I'm going to go with House of Decay.
Kyle, I have terrible news.
Oh my God. What?
The Zoroastrian faith believes that the dead will pollute the sacred elements, that is earth, water, and fire, if they touch them. Thus, they are placed atop large circular towers, in English called Towers of Silence, where the flesh is consumed by scavenger birds, and the bones are bleached by wind and rain. and afterwards they are put into ossuary pits or ossuary boxes.
I have seen this in video games, and I never once thought this is based on real practice.
It is, and in fact, it is still in practice, although it is declining because vulture populations are decreasing, and it's causing a problem. Because
Save the planet.
Yeah.
Save the bones.
Save the bones. Kyle, you ready for your next one?
I'm ready.
In the Hopewell and Mississippian cultures, a charnel house is a building used for mortuary services. When these buildings are no longer needed, they are abandoned and left as monuments, unbuilt and the materials reused, or burned and covered with earth.
I like that one. Burned and covered with earth. That feels Mississippian to me.
Kyle, you got it.
A
charnel house was used to provide shelter and protection for defleshing bones in preparation for cremation and for cremation itself. They often had crematoriums in them. And when no longer in use, charnel houses essentially became burial mounds, which are associated with the Hopewell, Mississippian, and Adena cultures.
Really, really fascinating.
Yeah, but they were just also called charnels. Last and least relevant, the word charnel is also used to refer to a hinge, often specifically a hinge on a helmet of a suit of armor. This definition is derived from the Latin word carnalis, meaning flesh, carceralis, meaning relating to prisons, or cardinalis, meaning important.
What was that second one?
Carceralis, meaning relating to prisons, like as in incarcerate.
Oh, incarcerate. Wow. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with that one because I like the idea that you're imprisoning your face.
It is not. It is cardinalis. Cardinalis literally meant relating to hinges, but could metaphorically mean hinging on, like something so important or so fundamental that other things hinge on it.
Crazy.
It is where we get the adjective cardinal, like cardinal sin or cardinal direction or cardinal virtue. It is where we get the Catholic title, cardinal, and where we get the red bird, the cardinal. See episode 29, Totonyms with Michael Steffen.
So funny.
Kyle, that's a minigame.
Yeah, I mean, it really wrapped up the rest of the charnel facts there. It did exactly
got a few
what
more
it said
in.
It was going to do. Yeah, that's good.
It gets used in a lot of contexts, but those were most of them.
Well, Emily, listen, I think that this episode truly hinged on your great work, and you succeeded, and so we've all benefited from that. And if you feel that way at home, remember that you can watch us on YouTube at Butter No Parsnips, and you can find Butter No Parsnips on other social media, on Facebook and Instagram at Butter No Parsnips Podcast, and on TikTok at Butter No Parsnips. And if you like today's episode, consider giving us a 5-star rating or review wherever you heard us.
And if you really like today's episode, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/butternoparsnips. Donating $5 or more gets you exclusive access to Buttered Parsnips, our after-hours podcast.
Thanks so much to all of you. You help us make what we make.
And with that, I have been Emily Moyers.
And I've been Kyle Imperatore, and this has been Butter No Parsnips.
Butter No Parsnips is produced by Seth Glicksman, Kyle Imperatore, and myself, Emily Moyers. The main and accompanying themes were composed by Kyle Imperatore.